This was never about money. It was about a grandson inheriting a war. Griffin doesn't step into Thornfield House as a buyer. He steps into it as the last witness of a violence that never truly ended. His grandfather believed he was building a legacy, but in reality, he was preserving trauma in concrete, steel, and silence. The hidden bunker, the forged documents, the slow poisoning, none of it is just plot. It is a perfect symbol of how power rots a family from the inside. And Griffin, without realizing it, becomes the final heir not to wealth, but to vengeance.
So get this. When the wall comes down, it's not just dust that spills out. It's 30 years of straight-up betrayal. Meet Griffin Calloway, 36 years old and an absolute legend in the underworld. This dude runs the entire East Coast crime scene from behind a squeaky clean business front. He's a total ghost, answers to nobody. The only guy he ever respected was his gramps, Henry, the OG who built this whole empire. But Henry's been 6 feet under for 3 decades. Supposedly from a heart attack. Yeah, right. Griffin never bought that story. So when he hears the old family mansion is getting snatched for a measly $120,000 in back taxes, he buys it in a flash. And he didn't buy it for the real estate, fam. Nah, he knew the truth about his grandpa's death was buried inside those rotting walls. But what he didn't see coming, a woman crashed out inside. Meet Lowen Price, 27, homeless, and living out of a clapped-out pickup. Turns out she was a brilliant architecture student, but her mom's medical bills torched her dreams. She'd been squatting in this mansion for weeks, learning all its secrets. So when Griffin's muscle finds her and shoves a piece in her face, she doesn't even flinch. She just stares down the most dangerous man on the East Coast like it's Tuesday. And that, my friends, is what makes him hesitate. And that one pause is going to flip the whole script because her expert eye is what finds the secret stash. $40 million and a truth bomb that will wreck his entire life. If you're hooked already, smash that like button, share this with your crew, and subscribe so you don't miss the chaos. All right, back to it. Griffin tells his goon, Perry, to chill. But this dude is locked on Lowen, finger on the trigger, just waiting for the green light to make her disappear. Perry's basically like, "Boss, she's a loose end. She's seen our faces. She knows about this spot. One text and we're screwed." But Griffin is just laser focused on Lowen. She's not begging, not making excuses. He's dealt with every type of person. Cowards who grovel, liars, you name it. But Lowen's silence, that's a new one. It's not her giving up. It's the vibe of someone who's already hit rock bottom and has zero fear left to give. "She stays," Griffin says, dead quiet. Perry tries to argue, but Griffin just turns and walks. And in their world, as a boss turns his back, the debate is over. That's when Lowen finally speaks up. "I don't take charity." Griffin stops, but doesn't even turn around. "I'm not offering any," he replies. "You know this place. I need you to make sure it doesn't collapse on our heads. You work, you get a roof. End of story." And just like that, they've got a deal based on nothing but pure, uncut stubbornness. That night, while Perry and 2 of Griffin's crew set up camp downstairs, Lowen heads back to her spot on the 2nd floor. Her whole life is a blanket, some water bottles, and a sketchbook she guards like it's gold. At night, the mansion gets straight up creepy. The wind howls, the stairs creak and groan like an old man's bones. This place is basically a living, breathing horror movie. The smell of decay is everywhere, getting into your clothes, your skin, like the house is trying to eat you alive. The furniture under sheets looks like a cult of ghosts just waiting for a signal. Griffin can't sleep, obviously. He's roaming the halls with a flashlight, checking out the peeling paint and empty spots where pictures used to be. And then, bam, he freezes. Hanging on a single rusty nail is an old black and white photo, so caked in filth you can barely see it. He wipes away the grime, and the picture comes into focus. It's a younger version of his grandpa, Henry, looking dapper in a suit. And in his arms is a little kid, maybe 5 or 6, laughing and hugging his neck. It's him. Griffin just stares at it, touching the glass over his grandfather's face, trying to connect across 30 years of silence. He doesn't say a word, but if you were there, you'd get it. You'd finally understand why the East Coast's biggest player dropped everything to buy a forgotten, rotted-out mansion. The next 3 days are a total bust. Griffin has a crew of 4 guys tear the whole place apart, from the creepy basement to the dusty attic. They're crowbarring open drawers and busting ancient cabinets. They find Jack squat. No treasure, no art, nothing. It's looking like the family gossip was right all along. That old Henry sold off everything before he died, chasing some crazy investments that left him completely broke. The story goes he died alone and penniless in some roach motel. Perry, the right-hand man, keeps saying it. "There's nothing here, boss. We're chasing ghosts." But Griffin isn't backing down. While his crew is ripping the place up, Lowen is in her own world upstairs. She's moving through the mansion with her sketchbook, tapping walls, checking beams, basically giving the house a full physical. She keeps her distance from the crew, no talking, no shared meals. There's a clear line, and nobody dares to cross it. But that line gets crossed twice. The first time is around 2 in the morning on night 2. Griffin can't sleep, a habit from his days as a 17-year-old street soldier, where sleeping soundly gets you killed. He goes upstairs, sees a light under a door, and just walks in. There's Lowen, on the floor, sketching by candlelight. Her pencil is moving with total confidence, no hesitation at all. Griffin glances at her sketchbook and it hits him. This isn't some doodle. It's a full-blown architectural cross-section of the entire floor, down to every pipe and beam inside the walls. She drew this masterpiece from memory. Lowen just looks back at him, not scared, not embarrassed. And for a split second, Griffin doesn't see a homeless chick. He sees a genius architect the world threw away. He says nothing, just turns and leaves. But that image is burned into his brain. The second time the line was crossed happened the next day. Lowen's checking out a ceiling downstairs when she overhears Griffin on the phone in the next room. And this is not the monotone guy who let her stay. This voice is ice cold, every word a bullet. He's saying, "Tell Vance his excuses don't matter. He owes me. He's got till Friday. If I don't see the cash by Saturday, his money problems and all his other problems are gonna permanently disappear." Lowen is just frozen solid in the hallway, and for the first time she feels a cold that has nothing to do with the creepy old house. And boom, the dread hits. But it's not for her. She's way past that. It's the ice-cold realization that the guy giving her a place to stay, the one admiring her art at 2 in the morning, is the same dude who could snuff out a life like he's ordering a pizza. She stays, but now she sees it clear as day. The gap between them isn't just distance, it's a survival chasm. That afternoon, while Griffin's downstairs checking out blueprints, Perry gets a buzz on his phone and heads to the porch. He eyeballs the screen, hesitates, then walks away from the door. He ducks around the side of the house where the stone walls muffle his voice, talking in a low-key whisper with his hand over his mouth and his back to the house. Griffin glances up from the plans right as Perry hangs up and turns. For a split second, their eyes lock. Perry says nothing. Griffin asks nothing. But something just cracked between them. On her 4th day, Lowen knocks on Griffin's first-floor door, the first time she's ever done that. Her face is a total wreck, nothing like her usual chill vibe. That quiet cool is gone, replaced with this locked-down chaos, like she just saw something wild and doesn't know how to explain it. "You gotta come upstairs," she says. "There's a room I couldn't get into for weeks. The door was jammed. I just busted it open." Griffin hits the stairs with her, Perry automatically following them. The room's at the end of the East Wing hall on the 2nd floor. Its giant oak door is hanging sideways, busted open by Lowen's crowbar. The second Griffin steps inside, he gets why she called him. It used to be a study. And used to be is putting it mildly, because whatever it was 30 years ago, it now looks like a bomb went off inside. Books are totally gutted, spines snapped, pages carpeting the floor so thick you can't even see the rug. The shelves on the walls are smashed up, looking like a mouth with half its teeth kicked in. But this wasn't some random psycho. The books were destroyed with insane precision, one by one, like someone was strip-searching every single page for a secret. And they failed because the real prize wasn't in the books. It was on the desk. A massive walnut desk sits under a boarded-up window with a stack of dusty old ledgers on it. When Griffin touches one, his fingerprints leave a perfect mark in the grime. He blows the dust off and flips to page 1. It's his grandpa Henry's handwriting. Faded, but you can read every single creepy, neat line. This isn't a diary. It's a shopping list for a villain. March 7th, 4,000 pounds of steel beams dropped off at 2 a.m. April 12th, 2 industrial diesel generators, cash deal, no paper trail. August 9th, custom ventilation system finished. Then it says, contractor got too nosy, contract terminated. Griffin flips through page after page, his jaw getting tighter with each one. Every entry is from 1988 to 1993. 5 straight years of buying military-grade gear, costing millions. Steel generators, blast doors. His grandpa secretly turned this house into a fortress while the family thought he was just nuts. Griffin looks up, scanning the wrecked room, the hall, the floor. He's been all over this house for 3 days. There's no sign of any of it. No steel walls, no generators, just old rusty vents. 4,000 pounds of steel, massive generators, tons of concrete. Where the hell did it go? Lowen just stands in the doorway watching him. She gets that with this guy. Silence is how you get answers. Perry scoots closer, looks over Griffin's shoulder at the ledger, and just shrugs like, see. The old man was crazy, bought a bunch of army surplus and let it rot. Sheer paranoia. Griffin ignores him. He flips to the very last page. The writing is totally different. It's not neat anymore. It's a shaky, rushed scrawl, like it was written by someone terrified out of their mind. They're coming. The hounds are closing in. The gallery is sealed. Let them think I'm crazy. Let them think I'm broke. The hollow wall holds the truth. Griffin reads it again, then a 3rd time. He traces the shaky words like he can feel his grandpa's panic from 30 years ago, and for the first time, it all clicks into place. Henry Calloway wasn't insane. He wasn't some paranoid old fool. He built something inside this house, something that needed 4,000 pounds of steel and its own power grid to protect it. And he hid it so well that nobody found it for 3 decades. He was running from someone, Who were they? Who were these hounds? And where in this dump is the hollow wall? Griffin shuts the book gently, like it's a bomb. He looks at Lowen, and his eyes aren't just curious anymore. He actually needs something from her. You've been mapping this house for weeks, he says. Find anything that doesn't match the blueprints. A wall that's too thick, a space that shouldn't be there. Lowen pauses. Her eyes flick from his face to the book in his hand, then back. Not yet, she says. But now I know exactly what I'm looking for. Next morning, Griffin's on the porch with his coffee when he hears gravel crunching down the road. The sound is off. The driveway to Thornfield is so messed up, cars have to crawl. But this noise is smooth, powerful, like a beast that doesn't care about obstacles. Then a black Bentley Continental rolls around the bend, so shiny it reflects the trees, cruising down the muddy path like a diamond in a toilet. The car stops. The driver gets out and opens the passenger door. A guy about 62 years old steps out. Perfect silver hair, not a single strand misplaced. Custom gray three-piece suit that fits like a glove. He glares at the mud for a second before stepping onto the porch in his expensive shoes. But the first thing Griffin notices isn't the suit or the car, it's the smile. Big, confident, and friendly, but it's all in the mouth. His eyes are stone cold, and they scan the mansion with a look Griffin knows all too well because he sees it in the mirror every day. It's hunger. Griffin Calloway, the man says, his voice smooth as hell, holding out a business card so thick it feels like a weapon. Warren Ashford from Ashford and Crane Holdings. I've been developing in this valley for over 30 years. I've had my eye on this property for a while. Griffin takes the card but doesn't bother looking at it, just holds it. What do you want? Straight to it. I like that. Warren steps onto the porch, his eyes still glued to the mansion. I know you just bought Thornfield. I also know you paid over $120,000 in back taxes to keep the county from seizing it. Mr. Calloway, this place is a money pit. The roof's shot, the foundation's toast, and the wiring probably died with the 90s. I just want the land, 12 acres here with that view. Major potential. I'll give you $2 million, cash. You sign the deed, and you've made 15 times your money in less than a week. Everybody's happy. Griffin sips his coffee. $2 million is nothing to him. He makes double that every quarter from one of his illegal casinos. But he doesn't say no, he just listens. In his world, a world where one wrong word gets you killed, silence makes people talk. If you just shut up, they'll always show their hand. And in the very next sentence, Warren Ashford bleeds his true motive all over the porch. Honestly, the house has to be demolished anyway, Warren continues, his voice like silk, but his eyes drop for a split second to the foundation. A normal person would have missed it. Griffin is not a normal person. It's a shame, but the sub-basement flooded badly back in the 1990s. Dude, the whole foundation is wrecked. We'd have to bring in heavy machinery before we can build. But our boy Griffin's face was a stone-cold mask. Inside, he was turning to pure ice. He literally just checked the original house plans last night. Lowen herself spent 3 weeks mapping out every single board in this place. Those plans never, ever showed a sub-basement. The house was built on unstable garbage tier ground. Any shady digging would have been a straight-up structural death sentence. There was no flood. The foundation was solid. This Warren Ashford dude was spinning a total fabrication, and it was all centered on one spot. The empty space under the house. the exact place where 4,000 pounds of steel and 2 massive generators just vanished 3 decades ago. He knew. This guy knew something was stashed down there, and he was here for the loot. "I'll think about it," Griffin said, his voice so flat his boy Perry didn't catch a thing. For a second, Warren just stared, and for the first time, that slick smile vanished. The mask came off, revealing a stone-cold predator in a designer suit. "Don't play me for a fool, Calloway." Warren's voice dropped, getting all gravelly. "Your grandpa already tried this game, and we all know how that ended for him." He just turns, walks off the porch, and slides into his car. The Bentley peels out, disappearing into the trees. Griffin stood there like a statue, his coffee now totally cold. Perry steps up. "Say the word, boss." But Griffin was silent. He was replaying Warren's last words, a major plot twist. "Your grandfather tried this game. That wasn't some business warning. That was a killer bragging about a hit." Warren Ashford knew exactly how Henry Calloway died because his family ordered the hit. For 30 years, that suspicion was a thorn in Griffin's side. Now, standing on the same porch his grandpa used to hold him on, that thorn finally has a name. That night, a wild storm just exploded out of nowhere. The sky had been heavy, and then bam, by 8, black clouds swallowed everything. Thunder was booming like an old war zone, and the rain came down in a solid sheet, just hammering the busted roof. The mansion was groaning under the attack like some dying beast. Wind howled through the boarded-up windows like a ghost. Upstairs, a door started slamming over and over and over again, a creepy, frantic heartbeat in the pitch black. Perry and his crew tried to crash on the ground floor. Not Griffin. He was in the ruined study, his grandpa's journal on his lap, his flashlight locked on one final game-changing line. "The hollow wall will keep the truth." He heard the footsteps before he even saw her. Lowen showed up in the doorway, her hair wet from a leak, holding a sketchbook like it was a shield. "Can't sleep," she said, making it clear they were in the same boat. Griffin didn't say come in, didn't say get out. She just walked in anyway, sat on the floor and leaned against a desk. They just sat there in the quiet with the storm going crazy outside. Just 2 people in a wrecked room, where the silence was way louder than any words. Then Griffin speaks, his voice barely a whisper over the rain. "My grandpa made this house a fortress, 4,000 pounds of steel, huge generators. He knew they were coming for him, and he still died." He paused. "A guy showed up today, wanted the house, lied about the foundation, and then talked about my grandpa like someone who knows exactly how a man gets whacked. He didn't drop a name, didn't mention the 30-year vendetta. He told her just enough so she'd get it. This wasn't just some property. It was a tomb, and someone was trying to rob it before Griffin could find the secret his grandpa locked away." Lowen just listened, then opened her sketchbook. "The hollow wall," she whispered. "You gotta find it." It wasn't a question. "If he hid something in the walls," she said, flipping to a sketch of the 2nd floor. "I can find it, but I need to measure again." She got up, tape measure out, and headed for the hall. Griffin was right behind her. Lowen measured the hallway from one end to the other, the tape stretched tight. 45 feet. Then she went into the study that shared a wall with the hall and measured it. 39 feet. She looked right at him. 6 feet, she said. "There's a 6-foot gap between this wall and the one in the hall." She walked to the north wall, which was covered by a massive bookshelf and wrapped on its frame, then knocked on the wall next to it. The sound was totally different. "This isn't just furniture," she announced. "It's built into the wall. The whole thing is part of the house. You only do that if you're trying to hide the wall itself. Behind this, there's a 6-foot void that's not on any blueprint." Griffin looked from the huge bookcase to the sledgehammer he'd bought, which was just sitting in the corner. It was a beautiful ancient piece, probably the last nice thing left at the whole dump. If he was wrong, he'd be smashing it for nothing. But then he saw Warren Ashford's face in his mind, that shark-like smile, that threatening voice. "Your grandfather tried this game." Griffin picked up the sledgehammer, feeling its heavy, cold steel. He faced the bookcase, gripped the handle tight, and he swung. The sound was like a bomb going off, a loud crack echoing in the room. Wood splinters flew everywhere. He swung again and again, breathing hard, his hands on fire. But he didn't stop until he smashed through and saw some old-timey floral wallpaper. He smashed the hammer right through the paper and the plaster, kicking up a choking cloud of dust. He jammed a crowbar in and pulled, nails screeching like a horror movie scream. Then he felt it, a rush of air that wasn't the usual mansion rot. This was a cold, clean smell, like a space that had been sealed off from the world for 3 decades. Griffin coughed, wiped the dust from his eyes, and pointed his flashlight into the hole he'd just made. And he saw it. No rot, no mold. Gleaming in the beam was a massive reinforced steel door, perfect and untouched, hanging open by just 1 inch. Beyond it, a black iron spiral staircase twisted down into absolute, bottomless darkness. Lowen was right there, covered in plastered dust, her eyes wide and locked on the void. Not a single word was said. Outside, thunder cracked. Inside, 2 people stood at the edge of the abyss Henry Calloway built 30 years ago, an abyss that was waiting for this exact moment. As Griffin stepped through the busted wall, a deep chill shot up his leg from the first step on the spiral staircase. For 3 decades, this iron staircase had just been waiting, but it felt crazy solid under his feet. No rust, no wobble, like time had skipped this spot completely. He shined his light down, but the darkness just ate the beam after a few feet. Lowen appeared at the hole. "I'm going with you," she said, and it wasn't a question. Griffin didn't argue. He went down. 10 steps in, the air changed. The mansion's musty smell vanished, replaced by a sterile metal cold like a bank vault. At 20 steps, the walls weren't brick anymore. They were smooth, polished bedrock, chilling in his flashlight beam. After 80 steps, the staircase ended on a concrete platform. And right in front of Griffin was the thing he'd only read about, a freaking blast door. This wasn't some cellar entrance. This was a Cold War beast made of inches of steel, built to survive a nuke. The door was open just a crack, a thin black line. Griffin shoved the crowbar in and threw all his weight into it. The hinges let out a nails-on-a-chalkboard shriek that echoed all the way up. With a groan, the door swung open. The darkness behind it was absolute, a thick, ancient blackness that had never seen light. Griffin's flashlight cut into the space, showing huge shapes. In the corner was a massive army green machine hooked up to an exhaust system that went straight into the ceiling. And boom, a massive Caterpillar diesel generator, exactly like the ledger said. Lead-lined, paid for in cash, 0 paper trail. Beside it, a dark gray electrical panel, main breaker down, with cables thick as his arm crawling from the Jenny and spreading across the ceiling like some kind of monster's veins. Griffin squared up to the panel. For 30 years, this thing was just sitting in the dark, waiting. He grabbed the breaker, took a deep breath, and slammed that sucker up. A whole second felt like a lifetime. Dead silence, just pure quiet. So thick, Griffin could practically hear his own heart pounding and Lowen breathing right behind him. Then this low rumble starts vibrating up from the floor, climbing straight into his chest. The caterpillar sputters once, twice, and then just roars to life, the absolute thrum of a beast waking up from a 30-year nap. The overhead lights flicker on, not all at once, but one by one. Click, 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 each one humming like an angry beehive. Cold white light just bleeds out, flooding the whole place and revealing the insane scale of it all. Griffin just drops his flashlight. He was in a massive underground chamber, completely encased in solid concrete and steel. The ceiling was over 10 feet high, and the concrete floor was polished like a mirror. The air, crazy cool and dry, was being pumped in by a ventilation system he could barely hear humming in the walls, somehow still working after 3 decades. A fancy mahogany conference table sat dead center, looking totally out of place, like someone dropped a piece of the upstairs world down here to make the fortress feel normal. Lining the right wall were 6 Mosler safes, each one taller than a dude, and locked down tight. The steel was so thick that knocking on it was like punching solid rock. But it was the far wall that blew Griffin's mind. The entire thing was a giant corkboard, a chaotic mess of papers, pictures, and clippings, all connected by a wild web of red string. Every single thread was a connection, and every connection was a piece of the puzzle Henry Calloway had been building in secret during his last years alone. Griffin just spun around in the middle of the room, looking from the safes to the board, from the generator to the table. His grandfather hadn't lost all his money. He hadn't gone crazy. His paranoia wasn't just in his head. Nope. He had turned his entire fortune into this underground bunker, burying it so no one could find it, just waiting for a Calloway to come down and find out the truth. Griffin stepped up to the conspiracy board, and his whole family history just started to shatter. First thing he sees is a huge black and white photo of 2 guys in front of an office building he recognized from downtown Poughkeepsie. The younger dude was Warren Ashford, maybe 30 years old, hair still black. His smile was the exact same one Griffin saw that morning, big but completely empty. Next to him was an older, tougher-looking version of Warren with the same hard jaw and stone-cold eyes. A name was scribbled underneath in Henry's red ink: Conrad Ashford. Red strings shot out from that photo like veins from a messed-up heart. Griffin followed each one. The first one led to a stack of copied bank transfers from the Cayman Islands, one after another, each for hundreds of thousands of dollars, pulled from accounts in Henry Calloway's name. But the signatures were total fakes, not even close to the real ones in Henry's books. A second string linked to contracts transferring assets, land, company shares, mineral rights, all with Henry's forged signature and dumped into a shell company that after 4 layers of hiding turned out to be Ashford and Crane Holdings. His granddad's fortune wasn't sold off. It was straight up stolen piece by piece using forged documents while Henry was still alive. The third string led to an envelope with an engineering report for the Ashford Creek Dam, built by Ashford and Crane in 1987. Tucked inside was a secret inspection report that said the contractor cheaped out on steel and waterproofing to save millions, creating a massive collapse risk that they never fixed. But the last thread made Griffin grab the table to keep from falling. It pointed to a thin medical file, but every page inside felt like it weighed a ton. These were the secret blood test results Henry got from a Connecticut lab 3 months before he died. The results showed a crazy high level of digitalis in Henry's blood, and not from a prescription, he had no heart problems, but from an outside source. Digitalis from the foxglove plant causes a slow, irregular heartbeat when given in small doses over time, leading to heart failure. When you finally die, an autopsy would just show that, especially with the weak forensics of the early 1990s. Henry Calloway didn't die from a heart attack. He was murdered, slow and steady, over months. And he knew it was happening. He knew, but he still died. Because by the time he figured it out, his body was too weak to fight back, leaving him just enough energy to write down the crime, build this underground hideout, and pray that a Calloway would one day find it. Griffin didn't even realize he was shaking until Lowen's hand landed on his shoulder. Her touch was light, warm, and said more than words ever could. He just stood there, knuckles white on the table, head down, breathing hard. And in that moment, the guy feared all over the East Coast looked like a 6-year-old kid losing his grandfather all over again. My grandfather, they murdered him, he whispered, the words sounding broken and raw. He wasn't talking to Lowen, but to the room, to Henry's ghost, to 30 years of secrets. He took a deep breath and walked over to the safes. 5 of them were locked up tight, rusted shut by time. But the 6th one, the smallest one at the end, was open just a crack. Inside was a perfect leather briefcase, and on top of it, an envelope with his name on it in that familiar blue-black ink. For the last of the Calloway line. With a shaking hand, Griffin broke the seal. The handwriting was Henry's, but stronger than in the books, each word carved out in his last clear moments. The time you read this, I'm gone, and the vultures are circling. It was Conrad Ashford who poisoned me. My own son Marshall is too weak and too trusting to see the betrayal. But the Empire isn't gone. I just made it disappear. The briefcase has $40 million in untraceable bearer bonds, all from before 1982. If you hold them, you own them. With them is the microfiche, the only original proof. It has the medical files, the money transfers, the fake contracts, the damn report, everything you need to destroy the Ashford name for generations. For 30 years, they've been hunting for this proof. They will come to this house. And they will come for you. Trust no one and nothing. Green key locks the exit. Red wheel shows the way. Live. Griffin popped the briefcase open with a sharp click. Inside, wrapped in plastic, were the bond certificates, each a slice of the $40 million Henry Calloway had cashed out into untraceable paper. Under the bonds was a small metal box with the microfiche, the one and only piece of damning evidence. He slammed the case shut. Lowen was right there, looking at him, not the money. In the harsh light of the bunker, 50 feet underground, the look they shared said everything. In that second, they knew their world had just cracked wide open and there was no going back. A crash echoed from upstairs, muffled by 30 iron steps and solid rock, but you couldn't miss it. The front door of Thornfield House had just been kicked in. Griffin's survival mode, sharpened by 20 years in the game, kicked into high gear. He spun to the mahogany table where some dusty security monitors he hadn't noticed were sitting in a corner. Wiping the power button, he flicked it on. The screens flared with static before clearing up into grainy video from cameras Henry had wired into the mansion 3 decades ago, all running off the same generator. Down below, the main screen showed the main hall, and an icy chill went down Griffin's spine. Right in the middle stood Warren Ashford. His suit was perfect despite the storm outside, hands in his pockets. He was looking around like a king who'd waited 30 years to claim his castle. On either side of him were 3 guys. 2 were unknowns in black coats, hands ready under their jackets. Then a 3rd guy walked into view, tall, skinny leather jacket, bald head, shining. He moved like a predator, taking his sweet time. It was Bones. Oh, Griffin knew that name. On the East Coast, if you were in the game, you knew Floyd Bones Keegan. He wasn't just Ashford's fixer, he was the guy who made people beg for death. But it wasn't Bones that froze Griffin solid. It was the 5th dude who strolled in, walking with a swagger Griffin himself had taught him. Perry. Perry Langston was standing next to the big boss, looking right at home. And when he talked, he wasn't some hostage. He was a subordinate reporting to his real master. He found the ledger last night, Perry said, cool as a cucumber, just like in their briefings. He's gonna keep digging for what the old man hid. It's only a matter of time. Warren just nodded, slow and menacing. Find him. Everything he's seen makes him a problem. Clean this place up. Fake a collapse. Burn the mansion down. With this storm, nobody's gonna ask questions. Griffin stared at the screen, but his brain was a million miles away. He was flashing back 18 years, finding a scrawny, hopeless Perry on some Boston street. Griffin, only 3 years into his own reign, had seen desperation and thought it was loyalty. He taught Perry everything. How to read people, how to command a room, and how to use silence as a weapon. He gave Perry his complete trust, and the guy cashed it in. That shady phone call on the terrace, the one that ended the second Griffin walked up, that little crack in the glass he'd just brushed off. A massive miscalculation. Griffin! Lowen's voice cut through his thoughts like a shard of glass. We need to go. Right now. He snapped back to reality, looking at her. She wasn't scared. She was calculating, like an engineer planning a demolition and mapping out all the exits. She practically dragged him back to his senses, knowing that standing still was a death sentence they couldn't afford. On the monitor, Bones was heading upstairs. He stopped at the study, and his flashlight cut through the dark, landing on the massive hole where the bookcase used to be. Griffin watched the exact second he figured it out. Bones spun around, his voice booming down the stairs. He's up here, there's a tunnel below. You could hear boots hammering on the floorboards above, then the clang of them hitting the spiral staircase. They were on their way down. Griffin grabbed the briefcase, slinging the strap over his shoulder. Lowen, without saying a word, snatched the small box of microfiche and stuffed it deep inside her coat. Griffin bolted for the generator controls. A huge, green-painted iron lever stuck out of the base. Green key locks the exit. He grabbed it with both hands and threw his entire weight into it. A deafening siren screamed through the bunker, making Lowen clamp her hands over her ears. Then came this insane noise, heavy-duty hydraulics slamming a hidden steel plate over the study entrance above, just as the blast door below sealed them in. The whole stairwell was now a trap. Bones, halfway down, got it instantly. He jumped the rest of the way, raised his gun, and fired 2 shots into the rapidly closing gap. A bullet ricocheted off the steel, screaming like a needle dragged across a record as sparks rained down the dark hallway. Griffin yanked Lowen down behind a table, covering her with his body. A total gut reaction to save the only person left who meant anything. With a massive boom, the blast door slammed into its frame. A series of heavy, echoing clunks followed as automated steel bolts shot into place, locking them inside. And then dead silence, except for the faint, pathetic banging of their enemies, now trapped on the wrong side of some seriously thick steel. Huddled behind the table, Griffin and Lowen gasped for air, the bitter smell of gunpowder hanging in the cold. They were secure, but also trapped 50 feet underground in what was now a concrete tomb. He got up and helped Lowen to her feet, his ears still ringing from the door's impact. This was their new reality, a sealed-off room. The desperate pounding on the door kept going, but was already starting to fade, sounding as pointless as thunder miles away. While Warren, Bones, and Perry were caged, so were they, with no way out, unless Henry's master plan had a final trick up its sleeve. A red wheel opens the passage. Griffin sprinted to the bunker's back wall, past a giant corkboard covered in papers and red string. He almost slammed right into it before he saw it. A steel pipe as thick as a man's leg jutting out of the concrete. On the end was a massive, red-painted cast-iron valve wheel, the size of a steering wheel on a truck, its spokes caked in decades of filth. He grabbed it and pulled. Nothing. 30 years of rust had welded it shut. He reset his grip, putting every ounce of his strength into it, veins bulging in his neck, his face turning beet red, but the iron wouldn't give an inch. Together. Suddenly, Lowen was right there, her hands grabbing the opposite side, her shoulder pressed against his. She didn't even ask which way to turn. A quick look at the valve told her all she needed to know. Counterclockwise. 1, 2, 3. They heaved in perfect sync, his brute force combining with her sheer determination, both of them driving into the spokes. For a couple of seconds, nothing happened, then came a loud crack, like a bone snapping clean in two. Rust showered down as the wheel groaned into motion, fighting them every single inch of the way. The concrete wall behind the board hissed as air escaped from around the edges of a hidden rectangle. It wasn't a wall at all, but a pressure-sealed door, swinging open on silent hinges to reveal a blackness that felt ancient compared to the bunker. The smell of wet earth hit them like a tidal wave, thick with rotting wood, tangled roots, and that sour, metallic odor of worms and soaked clay. A tunnel carved out of solid bedrock and reinforced with the same kind of steel beams from the ledger lay ahead. The whole thing was eerily silent, a perfect example of Henry's paranoid genius, leading them up and out. Griffin's flashlight beam sliced into the passage, which was barely wide enough for a single person to crawl through. He looked at Lowen. She looked back at him. Nobody said a word, no. Are you ready? Nonsense. She just went in and he followed right behind her. That was all it took. They moved forward, hunched over beneath the old timber. Griffin's light bounced off the damp dirt walls, throwing crazy shadows that seemed to leap at them from the darkness. The air was heavy and stale, and every breath took effort. You could hear the wooden beams overhead, creaking, some dropping dust on them, others making cracking sound that was way too close for comfort. Lowen stumbled. Her foot caught on a root poking from the ceiling, and she pitched forward, her hand smacking the mud. Griffin grabbed her arm and hauled her back up in one quick move. Once she was back on her feet, he didn't let go of her hand. It was the first time they'd touched, not out of some order or to survive, but because deep underground, holding on to someone was the only proof they were still alive. They kept going, slower now. Their hands stayed locked together. In the suffocating darkness, Griffin spoke, his own voice sounding strange, missing its usual cold edge and replaced with a softness he hadn't used with anyone in 20 years. "Thank you for staying." Lowen didn't even slow down. She just gave his hand one firm squeeze, her calm voice a little rough from the dust, echoing from the shadows ahead. "Don't die, Calloway. You still owe me a house." The tunnel began to slope upward, starting off gentle before getting much steeper, the ground turning from damp dirt to thick mud. The roots overhead grew thicker, forming a tangled net above them, and then the air started to change. The smell of dirt was still strong, but now it was mixed with the scent of wet grass and rain. The smell of the outside, of the open sky. Griffin looked up. A huge, reinforced slab of stone made up the ceiling, cleverly hidden as the floor of the carriage house, with a release lever tucked into its steel frame. Letting go of Lowen's hand, he pressed his palms against the rotten wood and pushed. The slab swung upward with a deep metallic groan as counterweights kicked in, clearing away years of moss and dirt in one smooth motion. A blast of cold, clean, rainy night air rushed in to greet him, and it felt incredible. He scrambled up, grabbing the edge to pull himself out before reaching back to help Lowen. They both collapsed onto the wet grass as rain poured down on their faces, just trying to catch their breath. For a second, they didn't move, just lay there, taking in the sky like they'd been reborn. Griffin pushed himself up and scanned the area. They were inside the ruins of an old carriage house on the edge of the Thornfield estate. 3 stone walls were still standing, but the roof was completely gone, and the inside was overgrown with weeds so thick you'd never guess what was hidden underneath. Most importantly, a dirt path snaked from the ruin toward the main entrance of the estate, where his car was parked a few hundred yards away in the storm. Griffin didn't make a run for it. He took out his phone, the screen already covered in rain, and dialed the one number he knew would pick up, even at 3 a.m. during a hurricane. Keats McGrath answered on the second ring. He didn't ask what was wrong or what happened. He just waited. In 20 years, Keats had learned that when the boss calls at this hour, you don't ask questions. Thornfield House, Hudson Valley. Bring 12 men, full gear. Get this, Warren Ashford is in there with 4 other goons, and Bones is with him. Griffin hit pause. Perry was the mole. I need them breathing, Keats. All of them. Breathing and ready to spill. A beat of pure shock hung on the line before Keats. Ever the pro shut it down. 45 minutes, he said, and the call ended. Griffin pocketed the phone and headed back to the carriage house. Lowen was curled up against a stone wall, soaked, with a $40 million briefcase covered in mud resting between them. Inside, the cash was bone dry, wrapped in plastic by a man 30 years dead. They just sat there in the dark. The only sound was rain hammering the broken roof and their own breathing. Then Griffin's voice cut through the storm, not because he wanted to talk, but because 3 decades of keeping it all locked down had finally cracked him wide open. What he found in that bunker was the key. When I was 6, he started, my grandpa took a picture with me at Thornfield's doors. He wrote on the back, "This empire is built on blood, not money. Hold it down, son." Last photo we ever took. 3 months later, he was in the ground. He went quiet, letting the rain do the talking. They all said it was a heart attack. My dad, the family, everyone bought it. I never did. Just a knot in my gut. But nobody listens to a 6-year-old's gut feeling, and nobody dares ask a grown man about it. I've been lugging that feeling around for 30 years. His eyes locked on the mansion, a black cutout against the chaotic sky. Tonight, I got the truth. My grandfather was poisoned. He knew he was a dead man walking. So instead of skipping town, he built a cage for the jackals who did it, burying the proof deep enough for me to find one day. He bet on me showing up. 30 years ago, he put his faith in me. And tonight was the first time I made good on it. His voice broke on the last word, a tiny fracture, but Lowen heard it. She stayed quiet for a long beat. When she finally spoke, her voice was a whisper aimed at the darkness, not at him. My mother had lung cancer, stage 3 when they caught it. I dropped out of Columbia to take care of her. 14 months. 14 months of sleeping in hospital chairs, eating garbage from vending machines, listening to that damn ventilator. Any rhythmic noise still makes me jump. She pulled her knees in tighter. On the last night, my mom couldn't even talk. The machines were doing the living, but she squeezed my hand once, then let go. She didn't cry. She had this scary calm, the kind you see in someone who ran out of tears a long time ago. After she passed, everything else went with her. The money, our home, my degree, all eaten by medical debt. I never tell anyone this stuff. People don't ask, and saying it out loud doesn't fix it. A silence fell between them. A crime boss and a homeless girl hiding out in a wreck of a building during a storm with a briefcase of $40 million sitting right there. Neither of them even looked at it. The money meant nothing. For the first time, neither of them was alone in their misery. There were no cheap words of comfort. No, I get it, or it'll be okay. They just shared the dark, letting another person's presence do what words couldn't. 40 minutes later, headlights sliced through the downpour. 3 black SUVs crawled up the muddy track. Keats McGrath, a mountain of a man with a red beard, stepped out, followed by 11 armed operators falling into formation. Griffin met them, gave quiet orders, and within 10 minutes, Thornfield House was completely locked down. They found Warren, Bones, Perry, and the 2 hired guns exactly where Griffin said they'd be, jammed in a stone corridor between 2 locked doors, their fury burned out and replaced with pure helplessness. Keats's team hauled to the first floor and put them on their knees, hands behind their heads. Griffin walked into the grand sitting room, a ghost of a place covered in dust sheets, and stopped right in front of Warren Ashford. The old man knelt there, his fancy suit ruined, but his eyes were still spitting ice. Griffin just looked down at him, totally still, with the kind of calm a man only finds after walking through hell. 30 years ago, your father fed my grandfather poison, Griffin said, his tone flat enough to be talking about the rain. Digitalis, small doses over months. He called murder a long illness, and no one ever blinked. Then you took what your father stole and built your empire on the ashes of my family. You thought that secret was buried for good. Griffin popped open the briefcase, pulled out a small black metal case holding the microfiche, and held it up for Warren to see. You forgot my grandfather always had a plan B. The medical files, the illegal transfers, the fake contracts, the damn report, it's all here. The originals. Everything the feds need to tear Ashford and Crane Holdings down in 48 hours. Warren's eyes fixed on the case, and for the first time all night, that icy stare flickered. Griffin didn't hand the proof over. He locked the microfiche reel in his personal safe back in Manhattan and sent out 3 copies within 24 hours. The first went to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, tucked inside an anonymous tip letter that laid out the whole scheme. The second landed on the investigations desk at the New York Times, gift-wrapped for a Pulitzer. The third copy went to Orla Finch, Griffin's lawyer, with very specific orders. If anything happened to Griffin Calloway, if he disappeared, got into an accident, or just dropped dead, Orla was ordered to leak the entire package to every news outlet and cop on the East Coast within the hour. It was a power play, not a play for justice. He didn't turn them in that night. He let the copies fly, letting them stew for 48 hours, forcing them to watch their world implode before the law kicked in their door. Federal agents hit the Ashford and Crane headquarters in Poughkeepsie on Tuesday morning, taking servers, drives, and 43 boxes of files. 11 executives were frog-marched out in their offices in handcuffs. Warren Ashford got picked up at his house that same morning. He was still in a silk robe, coffee in hand, his face totally blank when he saw 6 agents in tack gear on his porch. Bones was busted 2 hours later in a motel, frantically trying to wipe his phone. The rap sheet was long: conspiracy to commit murder, extortion, money laundering, 30 years of fraud, and endangering the public with that damn project. The story blew up. The biggest real estate empire in the Hudson Valley became a criminal enterprise overnight. But Griffin wasn't watching the news. The night Warren was arrested, he was sitting in a quiet Italian spot in the West Village, the kind of place with no sign, just candles and the smell of basil. Griffin had Keats bring the traitor to him, nice and quiet. This wasn't a reunion, it was a reckoning. Perry Langston sat across from him, straight-backed, hands on the table, staring right at Griffin. He didn't try to run, he didn't make excuses. He knew better than anyone that in their line of work, running and excuses are equally worthless. Griffin ate his pasta slowly, deliberately, like a guy with forever. He took a sip of wine, set the glass down, and finally met Perry's gaze. And Perry, who had stared down his enemies for 18 years without blinking, was the one who looked away first. "You know what I hate the most, Perry?" Griffin asked, his voice casual. "It's not the betrayal. Betrayal is simple. High stakes, weak men, it happens every day. What I can't stand," he paused, twisting the wine glass, "is that you actually thought I wouldn't find out. For 18 years I taught you the game and you still misjudged me. That's what's so insulting." Griffin didn't waste a bullet on Perry. No, that would have been too kind. Instead, while Perry was finishing his pasta, Griffin was systematically erasing him. By the time Perry stepped outside, his entire life was gone. Bank accounts? Frozen solid? Syndicate phone? A useless brick? The Brooklyn pad Griffin paid for, already being gutted by a cleanup crew. Then came the kill shot, a mass text to every player from Boston to Miami. "Perry Langston is a ghost. Do business with him, and you're doing business against me." In their world, getting clipped means you were somebody, but getting deleted, having your calls ignored, becoming invisible on the street, that's the ultimate execution. Perry Langston walked out of that restaurant and vanished from the East Coast underworld. Flash forward a month, and the Hudson Valley is popping off with autumn colors. The overgrown track to Thornfield House. Now it's a clean, graded road flanked by massive oaks dropping red and gold leaves, basically rolling out a new seasonal carpet. And at the end of the lane, the mansion is no longer a creepy skeleton. We're talking a full-blown glow-up. The whole east wing is wrapped in steel scaffolding. Crews are up there setting new stones, replacing the busted roof. The boarded-up windows are history, swapped for fresh oak frames and glass, letting the sun in for the first time in 30 years. Even the front doors Warren Ashford kicked in have been replaced with brand new ones, gleaming with polished brass. And who's in the middle of it all, pointing at blueprints? None other than Lowen Price. But this isn't the same girl Griffin found huddled on the second floor. She's still got that sharp look, but now her shoulders are straight with a new kind of power. It's not defiance. It's the look of someone who knows they're exactly where they're supposed to be. Griffin put her in charge of the whole Thornfield restoration, set her up with the studio, and got her back into Columbia to finish her degree that spring. And get this? Her tuition is paid by the Henry Callaway Scholarship, something Griffin set up for architecture students. He named it after his grandpa. Because for Griffin, a legacy isn't about bragging rights. It's a guarantee that the people who deserve it are never forgotten. Griffin's lone SUV rolls up. He steps out, ditching his usual army of black cars, and just soaks it in. With his hands in his pockets, he watches the sun hit the scaffolding. For once, this place isn't a tomb, it's coming back to life. Lowen spots him, wraps it up with her foreman, and walks over. She's got plaster dust in her hair, blueprints under her arm, and mud on her boots. She stops right next to him, looking where he's looking. "Roof's done in 2 weeks," she says. All business, but you can hear the pride in her voice. "Grand sitting room will take another 3 months. We're ripping out all the old wiring and pipes, but the study..." She turns, and a tiny smile hits her lips. "I left the sledgehammer mark, told the painters to work around it. It's a monument." He looks at her, she looks at him, and they don't have to say a thing. They both know that scar isn't damage. It's the crack that let a 30-year-old secret finally see daylight. Griffin whips out that old black and white photo from his pocket, the one of Henry Callaway holding him as a 6-year-old kid on the front steps. He walks into the study, right to where the hammer gouge marks the wall like a battle scar, and sets the picture on the new windowsill. It looks out at the sunlight hitting the autumn trees. "The void is filled, grandfather," Griffin says, "so low only the house can hear, and the house has its guardian." Lowen waits by the door, giving them their moment. Then Griffin turns to her, and for the first time in 30 years, the most feared man on the East Coast actually smiles. This wasn't a boss's smile. It was the look of a guy who finally got the one thing $40 million and a criminal empire couldn't buy him: peace. Lowen walks over to the window. She puts her hand on top of his, a simple, quiet move. It's the same way she touched his shoulder in that bunker when his whole world was falling apart. But this time, his world isn't breaking. It's being put back together. They just stand there, watching the afternoon. The trees are on fire with color. Leaves are dancing in the wind. And Thornfield House is finally filled with the sound of life. The story of Griffin and Lowen is all about walls. The fake wall Henry built for his secret, the invisible fortress Griffin built around his heart, and the 6-year prison of poverty Lowen was stuck in. Every single one had to be demolished for them to get free. The biggest treasures aren't in some vault. Sometimes it's just about having the guts to take a hammer to your own walls, face the ugly truth, and let someone in when you thought you were supposed to be alone forever. If this story hit you, I seriously want to hear about it. Which part got you the most? And have you ever had to tear down a wall in your own life? Fear, grief, your past, to find what was on the other side? Drop your story in the comments. I read them all, and it would be an honor to hear yours If you got something out of this, smash that like button to get it out to more people. Share it with a friend who might need to hear this today. And if you're new here, subscribe and hit that notification bell to catch new stories every day. To every single one of you watching, I'm sending you wishes for good health. A life packed with happiness and some serious peace of mind. Thanks for sticking with me all the way to the end. I'm out for now, and I'll see you in the next one. Model.